This episode is brought to you in part by the American Homebrewers Association, who invite you to give the gift of membership this holiday season. Purchase a membership gift card with promo code GIFTIPA, that's GIFTIPA, all one word, and receive a free copy of Dick Cantwell's book, Brewing Eclectic IPA, Pushing the Boundaries of India Pale Ale. Visit homebrewersassociation.org today for details. That's homebrewersassociation.org. Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, December 5th, 2019. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Casey Letellier and I sit down at Ivory Bill Brewing and talk about simplifying our malt bills. Instead of relying on just plain American two-row as a base and kind of doctoring it up with specialty grains, Casey brews tasty beers based on simple recipes using the character of a little bit more interesting malts. If you go to basicbrewing.com, you can find archives of our audio and video shows, and if you go to basicbrewingshop.com, you can find our DVDs, our brewer's logbooks, and other basic brewing gear. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Basic Brewing, and find our show page on Facebook as well. We have a cool Basic Brewing app on iTunes and Amazon.com, and we're found all over the place where fine podcasts are served up. And if you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing. And many thanks to everybody who's helping out. If you go to patreon.com/basicbrewing, you can see a long list of stuff that you can access if you sign up as a supporter. And financial supporters have already seen the video episode on my simple cider that I spiked with cinnamon whiskey. That was a fun experiment. The general public will see that this coming Friday. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving if you celebrate that American holiday. Canadians had their Thanksgiving a while back, of course. We had a bunch of tasty food this past Thursday and spent some quality time with family. I appreciate your patience with my taking last week off. We even took time to take part in a heated family discussion about whether chocolate pecan pie is, quote-unquote, real pecan pie. It's good to be upset about the important things in life, right? It is, by the way, chocolate pecan pie is real pecan pie. I've gotten a ton of disaster show entries, thanks to everybody who has sent those in. So many this year that I don't know if we're going to be able to read all of them. Either that or we're going to have like a 2-hour episode. We'll just have to see. I've been telling people that Sunday the 8th is the deadline for getting those in. I've asked Desiree at High Gravity and Casey at Imperial Organic Yeast to send me goodies for our favorite stories. We send out a little goodie bag to people every year. I don't know what they're sending, but it'll be fun to see. It's probably not something real big. I said you can do trinkets or something small. It's fun to send little stuff out. People are always appreciative, even if it's small stuff. So get your stories in by Sunday to james@basicbrewing.com. Let's hear a word from our friends and sponsors at Tavour. Tavour is a way to select delicious craft beers that you may not be able to find in your area and have them delivered to you. It's not a Beer of the Month club where somebody else chooses the beer for you. You only pay for the beer that you choose over the course of the month. Signing up for Tavour is free. Just create an account at Tavour.com. That's T-A-V as in Victor, O-U-R.com. Download their iPhone or Android app, and you'll receive notifications for 2 new beers each day that are available for purchase with in-depth tasting notes from Philip at Tavour. This month, look for selections from Casey Brewing and Blending, Great Notion, Grimm, Maplewood, Ravenna, and Chapman Crafted Beer. It's amazing the amount of beer that Tavour has access to. Just check out their Instagram feed. If you're not interested in the beers that you see, no worries. Just skip the ones that you don't want. However, when you see something that you do want, and you will, don't wait. Just click on that to get it and add it to your crate. Your beer arrives fresh every few weeks, allowing you enough time to fill a box and pay the least shipping, which is handy. Why don't you check it out? It doesn't cost anything to sign up, and there's no obligation to purchase anything. In fact, if I can ask you a favor, go to tavor.com, T-A-V as in Victor, O-U-R.com, or download the app, and when you sign up, enter the promo code Basic Brewing, it's all one word, and you'll get $10 off your first shipment of $25 or more. So again, it's free to sign up. There's no obligation to purchase. Sign up at tavor.com or with the Tavor app and enter Basic Brewing as the promo code and get $10 off your first shipment of $25 or more. And many thanks to Tavor for being a continuing sponsor of the show. I want to give an unsolicited shout-out to a new podcast out there that's off topic for this show, but it might be of interest to you. My internet buddy, Bill Streeter, is part of a new podcast on documentary films called Strangers to Fiction. Bill and I have never met in person, but we started video podcasting at about the same time, and we linked together. I can't remember how back in the day, but he produced Lo-Fi St. Louis, and that has grown into a significant local music force in St. Louis. Anyway, Bill and his friend Jacob McIndoller are documentary filmmakers themselves, and they have intelligent, fun conversations about documentaries on this podcast called Strangers to Fiction. For example, the latest episode I listened to covered 3 Werner Herzog films, one of which was Grizzly Man, which is one of my favorites. So check out Strangers to Fiction. Bill and Jacob don't know I'm doing this, so it'd be fun to see if they notice a mysterious bump in their download rates. A little karma, a little Christmas time karma. Check out Strangers to Fiction. No strangers to this podcast are our friends and sponsors Desiree and Dave from High Gravity in Tulsa. How about that segue? High Gravity is having a sale on money. Well, a sale on gift certificates, which is, it's basically money, on highgravitybrew.com anyway. For a limited time, you can get a High Gravity gift certificate for 10% off. If you go to highgravitybrew.com, you can see they have several gift certificate denominations from $5 all the way up to $1,000. So if you've been wanting to get into electric brewing with a Warthog system, for example, if you don't want to wait for somebody else to give you a gift certificate, you can buy one yourself and save 10%. Now, the discount will be applied at checkout. So just add a gift certificate of your preferred denomination to your cart, and you'll see the 10% savings, when you check out. Now, this is only for a limited time. Check highgravitybrew.com for details. You can not only use these for electric gear, but everything else on their store, on their site. Beer kits, ingredients, all the works. Take the pain out of propane. Now for 10% off gift certificates at family-owned and operated highgravitybrew.com. Okay, I was really pleased to have the opportunity to spend time with Casey up at Ivory Bill, as I always am, and sample what they've been up to lately. Casey's been taking a simplified approach to his recipe formulation. Well, Casey Letellier, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
It is very nice to be back.
It's good to see you. How are things going here at Ivory Bill Brewing Company in Siloam Springs, Arkansas?
They're going very well, thank you. It keeps us busy, and this is the best job I've ever had.
Well, you're doing great, and if you don't follow Ivory Bill on the Instas and all the socials and all that stuff, you do a good job of keeping people up to date, and it just every time I see that, it's just like, man, I need to go up there and hang out because it looks like you're brewing great stuff. I'm excited that I've got a flight in front of me, and the reason why I originally got in touch with you is you've had a couple of barrel releases recently, and I said, wow, now, you and I talked, we did an episode with your home brewing club here in Siloam when you filled a barrel, and I kind of wanted to catch up with you and, on your barrel learnings. And so I suggested that we get together and talk about barrels, and you demurred. You said, but you suggested another approach. So what's our topic today, Professor?
Well, our topic is kind kind of recipe formulation and maybe thinking through starting points for that in a little bit of a different way. Where I came from this was thinking about how when I started making beer back, how many years ago was that now? 14 years ago? I think we did a show like shortly after I started homebrewing. Yeah. And at that point in the process, I was like a lot of other homebrewers. I was trying to make my beers like commercial beers. And so I would see all the information I could about different beers that I liked, and I would try to imitate them at home. And then sort of realizing over the course of years of brewing that a lot of commercial recipes are based on the fact that most breweries, for kind of economic reasons, have a huge silo of basic two-row malt. That's fairly neutral, fairly generic. It doesn't have that much character on its own, but it's a fine thing to layer other flavors on. However, as home brewers, and then also for us as a brewery that really, like, we're small enough that the economics of huge bins of two-row malt don't make sense. And so we've taken a different approach to building recipes where we choose base malt that has the character that we're looking for in a finished beer. So instead of starting with two-row, adding Munich, adding biscuit, adding carbon malt, we find a base malt that does as much of what we're looking for as possible, so that our recipes can be simple and elegant and that the underlying ingredients have a chance to shine through.
It's interesting that you say that, because as home brewers, when we first started out, it was professional brewers. Well, they've got a separate mash tun, and they've got it's a 3-vessel system basically. So we made a mini version of the 3-vessel system, and I remember when I was buying two-row by the 50-pound bag, and so it was trying to be like the big breweries, like you said, on a tiny scale, and it got to where I felt so limited, because I would buy ingredients in bulk and then look at my ingredients and say, well, I've got to brew with all this stuff before it stales. And so you're locked into that proposition to where, rather than being free in choosing your recipes, you're locked into choosing your recipes because of what you've got on hand. So I guess that's sort of similar to what you're talking about.
That definitely figures into thinking that by making our beers based on mostly interesting flavored, like barley that's just intrinsically delicious, then I'm not sort of figuring out how to manage a bunch of bins of different specialty malt.
Yeah, and as I've gotten older, my recipes have become more simple. I've been doing more smash beers. I've been doing more beers where there is just an interesting base malt and then just a couple of things up on top of it. I think a lot of times, especially in the beginning, you think a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of that is going to make it more complex and better, because you're putting more stuff in there. But a lot of times, you might wind up with something that's kind of muddied. And to kind of there's a paradigm that popped up in my head from the corporate world. When they're talking about shifting your paradigms, there's the story of around the holidays, someone a family was cooking a ham in the oven, and the child said, well, it was watching the mother cook or the father cook the ham, and they would cut the ends off of the ham before putting it in the oven. And the child said, well, why do you do that? And he said, well, that's what my mom always did. And so the child asked the grandmother, said, why do you cut the ends of the ham off before you put it in the oven? And said, well, our oven was only this big when so we had to cut the ends of the ham off. So a lot of times, in carrying on traditions or in carrying on methods that other people use, we are taking their baggage with us. And nowadays, it seems like with no chill brewing and brew in a bag and late word hopping and all these things that as home brewers we can kind of make things up as we go along. And you as a small brewer, you can do the same thing. You don't have to do things just because they've always been done that way.
And yes, that's true. And it's also, as American craft brewers, I think American craft brewing kind of came into its own in a very specific set of circumstances, like that small oven, whereas we're not necessarily subject to the same constraints, and that gives us a chance to look further afield to some German techniques, some British techniques, and those malts, and do something that looks past some of those constraints that were part of the learning process. So yes, absolutely.
Well, let's have an example here. What is this first beer? This is very clear, very golden, I would say. Cheers.
Cheers.
I almost tasted my microphone. So we're there already.
First beer.
I haven't even said. I took 2 swigs. I'm already. So talk about this beer.
This one's called Regular, and this is a beer that people who first come in here assume that we make as a gateway beer, which is not actually the case. This is my beer. This is the beer that I drink the most. It's one of my favorite floor malted Pilsner malt. It's from Czechoslovakia. It's two different heritage barleys that go into this. It's then also got just a small percentage of corn from War Eagle Mill. So it has a nice sort of local connection plus the kind of really wonderful, elegant old world malt. And that's it. It's not particularly bitter, but it gets a large late addition of Hirschbrucker, this beautiful German landrace hop that's old and elegant. So yes, it is very pale. This is one of the few beers we find. So it's shiny in the glass. Everything's unfiltered, but we do find this one. And it is approachable. And that little touch of corn scratches this little part in your brain that makes it feel very familiar to people who grew up drinking American beers. But it's crisp and elegant and nothing to hide behind. It's just a very, very simple beer.
It's way good and way drinkable. Would you call it a cream ale since it's got the corn in there?
It depends on who I'm talking to.
That's another thing that's baggage. You got to fit these things into different slots.
I have on various occasions called this a cream ale, a blonde ale, a Kolsch, a bitter. It is an English yeast strain. And we also we went to a Saison and Hip Hop Festival, and I brought a dry hopped version of this beer.
It's way good. It's nicely balanced, but it's the grain really comes through, and there's a little bit of a sweetness. It's not not a cloying sweetness, but there's a sweetness in the backbone that is really nice. Like I say, it's got enough crispness to it where it's not too sweet, but the mouthfeel is really nice. It's a super simple is not a derogative term.
Right.
It's nice and simple and just clean, but there's a lot going on as far as the malt flavor, and I think that's what we're talking about.
Yes. I think that little bit of corn kind of does add to the perception of sweetness, and that's a fun sort of tension to have present. It's actually like a super well attenuated beer. This one gets down to 1 degree Plato, 1.004. So it's very dry. Which, fun little side note, all our beers are open fermented, and our yeast just loves being in open fermenters. Typically, the lab says our yeast strain should get down to 70% attenuation if we're lucky, and we routinely get 80, sometimes 85% attenuation, and that's open fermentation.
It surprises me that it's that dry because there is a substantial mouthfeel, and maybe it's that perception of the sweetness from the corn in there that kind of tricks your palate a little bit. I don't know. Since it is such a light malt, do you have to take any steps, boiling an extra time to get rid of DMS precursors? Because this is not corny as in any DMS.
It's a pretty standard boil. I usually do our very quirky English kettle takes about 30 minutes to get up to, like, once it starts boiling, it's 30 minutes of boiling slowly, faster to the point where I'm like, okay, that's a boil. So it's usually about 30 minutes of a very light boil. Once we get a good rolling boil, it gets an additional 30 minutes.
Okay.
So it's not a particularly long boil. And I think too that open fermenters help with scrubbing off some of the DMS precursors.
And your boiler is fairly open, so that there's not an opportunity for condensation to drip back in, that might have the DMS stuff in it.
Yes, that's true too. A very open boiling kettle.
Well, very nice. What's the second beer?
This second beer is called Cascade Wheat, and that pretty much describes what we have here. This is Simpson's Golden Promise barley, German malted wheat, and Cascade hops all through. It's in the boil, it's in the whirlpool, it's hop back, and then 2 dry hop additions, all with Cascade.
Yeah, this is all about the hops. Whereas the first beer was all about the malt, this one is all about the hops. And there is it's a little more, I guess, is dank a proper word for this?
I will embrace the dank.
This may be the dankest, 100% Cascade beer that I've had, because there is that, usually Cascade is like, grapefruit and light, but this has that, but then it's like, there's something dark there too, as far as the hoppiness is concerned.
Yes, I'm pleased with the complexity that emerges from this hop that I brewed with Cascade a bunch when I started brewing, and then there were cooler kids on the block, and I kind of neglected Cascade. And I bought the whole hop harvest from a small farmer in Wisconsin, which included several bales of whole leaf Cascades. And so this beer actually emerged out of, I had a bunch of Cascades in my cooler that I needed to start making good headway on. So I've always loved Cascade. I feel like it has really great American heritage, with really the first American hop that people said, no, we're going to embrace this unique citrusy American aroma. And I love the hop, and I'm glad to have it be something that's back on my radar of great American hops.
So is there a difference between Wisconsin Cascade and West Coast Cascade?
Yes, but it's difficult to define because the adjectives still feel like the same, where lots of tangerine, citrus, a little bit of spice, a little bit of floral. So some differences, but also still recognizably the same hop.
So we're talking about hops, and we're supposed to be talking about malt. But it's all a part of it.
I do feel like as you kind of, especially making the jump from a beer with very moderate hop aromatics to one that's kind of the first thing you get. It takes a little while to acclimate your palate, but as you go along, the sort of dry toastiness of the wheat starts to emerge. So it finds its own balance, but it does. It takes a few sips.
Is the finishing gravity about the same as the first one?
Slightly drier.
No way.
Yes, this one usually gets down to 1.003.
That's incredible because it is chewy, super chewy.
Yay, wheat!
And that's the malt.
Yeah,
it's a fairly neutral background for those hops. We've had wheat beers, or wheat has been described as kind of lemony in some instances, which would blend in with the hop character as well. But it's a fairly neutral malt background, but it is there, and it supports all that hoppiness, all that bitterness very well.
thanks.
So on a less hoppy beer, what are the characters that you would get out of that wheat?
Sort of, I would say, like this elegant softness, a little bit of like a dry, toasty kind of character. But yeah, nice malty. I feel like it has that sort of like toasty dryness, regardless of like where your residual sweetness actually lands. That feels like a character. So
it's way good. What have we got next?
Next, we have Extra, which is in the vein of American Pale Ale. You could call it Session IPA. The dry hopping rate is similar to kind of session IPA range. This one is Maris Otter, floor malted Maris Otter, and rye, and that's it.
It's an orangey beer. I would think that you would have had some Crystal 60 in there or something.
We have no crystal malt in this brewery.
But the color is amazing. Is that the Maris Otter, or is that
That's the rye.
That's the rye.
That's the rye. The rye gives it like a beautiful kind of orange glow. And the other fun thing, so touching on Maris Otter briefly, although we'll come back to that. Maris Otter, like beautiful heritage variety. This is one of the few floor malting. Crisp has, you can get Maris Otter just kind of conventionally malted, but there's still a few places that do floor malting, and Crisp has one malt house that does floor malting, which I just feel like it has more depth of character. Rye is really fun to brew with, and I feel like you've been like one of the people who I hope is getting rye back on people's radar. Rye, like, not only does it have this like beautiful, chewy spice, almost wintergreeny sometimes. It's hard. It's one of those things that feels really hard to describe, but it has this like beautiful character. It plays so well with hops. And then the other really fun thing about rye is one of the few grains that actually returns nutrients to the soil, stabilizes soil. And so as we sort of think about the implications of the grains that we're using to make beer, most of them are sort of taking from the soil. And so using rye is feels like a way to give back to the soil a little bit and make beautiful beer. Like, I love rye.
So what's the percentage of rye in this, and what's the finishing gravity of this beer?
This one is a touch sweeter. This is 1.006 or 1.5 degrees Plato. And it is 70% Maris Otter and 30% rye, which for my system is just kissing the edge of where rye will actually sparge.
Gloppiness.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a. It's funny, when I brew 100% rye beers, I don't find them all that spicy. But I think in conjunction with other malts, like the DC homebrewers sent an experiment when they did different adjuncts, and the flaked rye was just like super spicy. But I do get some spice in this, and it's nicely hoppy as well. But there is a backbone of malt character. It's kind of caramely a little bit, but there is kind of a rye spice in the background that makes it really nice and complex for such a simple. And talk about the hopping on this one.
Oh, so this one, the really defining hop is Chinook. It gets two big dry hopping additions of Chinook. And then one fun thing with tying hopping to malt profile is this beer originally had, it was 80% Maris Otter and 20% rye. And because I was trying to find a few more places to use rye in the brewery, I changed the recipe to just give it a little heavier rye. And it blended so beautifully with the hops. It went from a beer where I really liked the balance and the character, the switching, it just tasted juicier. So, man, rye and hops.
Now to duplicate if you were to start, this is a mental exercise, or maybe you've got some background with some of your past recipes, but to duplicate the malt character of this with a 2-row base, what are the other adjuncts or the other specialty grains that you would throw in on top of that to reach this?
Well, to kind of hit the complexity of the Maris Otter, I'd be tempted to throw in some biscuit, maybe a little caramel 20. The rye is hard. What would you do?
But you could still do rye.
Still do rye? Okay. If I can still do rye, then I feel like I'd want a little bit of biscuit and a little bit of light caramel. Yeah, and I think that would give you some of the same roundness, but it's sure a lot simpler just to use the Maris Otter. And then you are helping keep alive a beautiful heritage variety of British malt. Mm-hmm. So,
and there are so many, there's smaller malt houses coming online, across the country. There was, I can't remember the name of the malt house that I tried in some of the beers down at Preston Rose, but it was a musical or lyrical name, and I can't remember. Go back and listen to that episode and see. But they were really interesting. She was doing some smash beers down there that, you would swear that there was caramel malt in there because of the the Lovibond number that they hit, when they did this base malt. So I think that as time goes on with these smaller malting companies, you're going to find some really interesting things, and it wouldn't be surprising if more sort of local American beer styles arose out of that.
I agree. I think that it will be very fun to see what new things come out of regional American malting companies, and I think that will be a really important turning point in terms of farmers having an outlet to actually do specific varieties. At this point, most American malting companies aren't buying varieties. They're buying grade, so it has to hit a certain set of numbers. But beyond that, it's just going into a big bin with all the other varieties. Again, there's nothing terribly wrong with that. There's a lot of great beer being made that way, but I feel like it's so much more fun to be connected with a specific region, a specific barley type. And I'm super excited to see that being an option with American barley too.
This next beer is more of a darker copper color, and it's less hoppy. It's more fruity, and I'm not sure whether that's coming from a hop addition, or if that's yeast, or if that's malt, or if that's all everything.
Yes. So I think some of those nice fruit notes are yeast shining through, and this is a really clean, restrained background for the yeast to show off. This has no aroma addition hops at all. So it's one bittering addition at the very beginning of the boil, and that's it.
Wow.
So this is both dark and Pilsner, floor malted Czech barley, and just the smallest whisper of chocolate malt. The fun thing is, by the time you come back and we talk again, I hope to have evolved away from any chocolate at all, and it will be just the two colors of Czech barley. I've been gradually increasing the amount of the dark, which the Bohemian dark barley is a really similar roasting profile to Munich malt. So I'm trying to get to a specific color, and I don't need the chocolate for flavor. It's just a touch for color, and I'm backing away from it and down to just a tiny bit.
I'm going to modify my my descriptor from fruity to honey. To me, this tastes like honey. It's nicely balanced, but there's a sweetness character that is. I tagged it first as fruity. Maybe it's because I was coming off of hops. But the more I taste of it, the more it's a nice honey character.
I agree, and I think if you were trying to build this beer with a base of 2-row, that there would need to be definitely multiple things that you layer on to make up this sort of delicious complexity with specialty malts, maybe some honey malt, maybe a little melanoidin. But again, I think you'd miss out on some of the depth of the really incredible barley that's there.
It's it's super nice. It's super drinkable. It's maybe it's my favorite so far. I don't know. It's as simple as the first one, and I love the hoppiness of the previous two and the character of those. But this is just so, I don't know. It just scratches an itch, and I want to eat some ham.
yes, it's a really food friendly beer for sure. And this is.
And tell me what this is again.
So we call this old style. Evidently, there's someone else uses that name for something terrible.
It's less expensive maybe than what you.
Yeah, maybe so. We were trying to think of a way of explaining that this was an alt beer. Inspired by German alt style beers. Nice malty pre-lager style of German beer. That's old style.
And what's the finishing gravity on that?
This one's 1.007. Sometimes it'll get down to 6.
It's got a nice mouthfeel as well. But yeah, super super quaffable. It's not as quaffable as the first one because I could drink a lot of in a hurry. This one is it's got a heavy enough mouthfeel that you want to think about it. You can't just swig down a whole pint in a hurry on this. You might want to play a game or eat some food along with it. But it's super. It shows off the malt really really well. And so, again, it's proving your theory, your theorem, You know.
Good.
Professor.
I'm glad we're not to this point and you're like saying, oh, you're crazy.
I've known you for a while. I've tasted your beers, Casey. I know that you know what you're talking about. This one is super dark, but it's got if I hold it up to the light, it's got a reddish hue to it, almost purple. But tell me about this one.
So this dark beer is actually...
This is all Pilsner Malt, right?
Yes. 14-hour boil. So this is actually called dark, and this is inspired by one of my favorite British styles of beer that's just called dark mild. And I think it is a tragedy that this is not part of the repertoire of American breweries. It's not as like punch you in the face with roast as a stout. It tends to be a little lighter bodied and more refreshing than a brown ale. So it's sort of somewhere in between those two. It's definitely got roast, soft chocolate, but man, most styles of beer at this point, I feel like, homebrewers can go out and buy a dozen commercial examples and sort of like decide which direction they want to go. Man, at this point, if you want a mild, you still probably are going to have to brew your own or come here. But it's a neglected style of beer. It's so delicious. And this is a place where I have reformed my brewing habits so dramatically. One of the dark beers that I used to do, the recipe had 8 different malts in it, and it was a good beer, but that's a mess to keep up with that much specialty malt, and I really did believe that it was possible to achieve complexity with fewer results. So this is 3 malts. It's chocolate malt, British chocolate malt, dark Munich, and Maris Otter, and that's it.
What are the percentages?
It is, this has evolved a little bit over time. I have sort of gradually upped the Munich so that I didn't have to split bags. So it is 70% Maris Otter, 30%. Well, nope. I'm missing a percentage there. It's about 5% chocolate, 25% Munich, and then 70% Maris Otter.
Wow. It hits you up front with the chocolate, but then there's like dark fruit, like prune, and then on the top of it is a little bit of anise or licorice. Mm-hmm. You get that, or am I crazy?
You're not crazy. Yeah, I get that too.
But it's nicely, again, the basic brewing drinking game is every time I say nicely balanced, but I just came up with it. I just came up with that. Yeah. No, but it is nicely balanced. But it is drinkable. It is not like, a Russian Imperial Stout where it's like punching you in the face with chocolate. This is a nice lighter drinkable chocolate. What's the hopping on this?
So this one is it's a little bit of Magnum for bittering, and then it gets Hersbrucker in the finish. Not a ton, but enough to like build a little complexity there. And it's about 20 IBUs. So 20 IBUs, and it's also 4.8% ABV, which both of those numbers are slightly too high for like at least a BJCP kind of what they think a dark mild should be. But this is also this is the version of this beer that felt like it would be a good fit for our market.
I'm looking for coffee, but maybe I'm getting some coffee in there, but it's more chocolate than coffee.
Yes, I definitely agree.
Wow, that's real good. If you've got a crowler of this, I'm going to take some home to Susan. But And I pay for my crowlers here, by the way. Wow, that's really good. Okay, we've got one more in the flight. Cheers for the last one. What do we got here?
So this is extra extra. This is our IPA, and it's never the same recipe twice. We kind of reinvent this beer every time, and we can play with seasons and small batches of hops that become available, and show off new malt varieties and new hop varieties. So we recently did one with spelt. We've done Ericlea, heritage Italian barley. This one, I want it to be super light and crisp. Sort of as we moved into colder weather, I wanted to actually do a beer that made people feel like this is like a little summer sunshine to look forward to. So this is extra pale Weyermann Pilsner malt. That's it. And then all of the dry hopping is Comet. And Comet is another one of those really fun American hop varieties, almost extinct for a while because it was developed as a bittering variety. At the time, had pretty good alpha, but like higher alpha varieties came along, and it has a very singular aroma that initially, when this hop was developed, was not considered appealing. But now it's made a resurgence, and it has some of the sort of citrusy quality of some of the other early American hops, but with a real interesting, like, extra quality to it. Something earthy, something like, I think some dank here too. Really wonderful complex hop.
When it first hit my nose, I thought perfumey. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm I'm on my sixth sample and my palate's getting fatigued, but there was I got like a floral, perfumey kind of character. Again, am I crazy or
not crazy? I get that too. Yeah.
Wow. But then there is, on the aroma, there is that sort of darker hoppiness as well. So this is a single malt beer.
Mm-hmm. Single malt. It has trying to create a sort of a soft backdrop for the Comet hops that were coming. This one is almost exclusively Willamette in the boil. So it's not quite a smash. I don't know. What's the acronym for single malt and two hops?
Double hop. Smuddaha. But the bitterness is not super high in this one, which is good, I think. But it's nicely balanced. But there is a sweetness in the beer as well that complements everything that's going on. And what's the finishing gravity here again?
1.006, so 1.5 degrees Plato. And it is a little, like, it at least calculates out to about 65 IBUs. Like, the calculations with IBUs are, as you know, so all over the place. But that's about where it calculates.
It's my new favorite.
we have that in crowlers too.
Okay. I'll have one of each, please. No, that's delicious. It's nice. It's fruity, but it has perfume on the nose as well. But that malt bill, it just supports it, and I'm just amazed that these beers are finishing as low as they are, because the mouthfeel is so satisfying on each of these. And maybe I've got a bad hydrometer at home. I don't know. I broke it recently, so I got a new one. But if I had a beer that finished as low as your numbers are saying, it would risk being perceived as being watery, or you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And again, I do think that really good malt can tolerate those, like, very attenuated finishing gravities, like, and retain character. And we mash very low Dark is the sort of warmest thing in this lineup. We match that at 153. But like regular, that's like 146 is sort of standard mash temp for that. And then, man, open fermentation. It makes a difference.
Oh. Well, whatever you're doing, it's working. These are all delicious, and it's some of them I would have trouble categorizing myself, because some may straddle, like you said, the one that's kind of Kolsch's, and it's
whatever you want it to be.
Yeah, exactly.
It meets you where you are.
Yeah. Which is the reason to come and get a flight, so that you can figure out what you like. Well, this is awesome. I don't know that we've talked since you and Dorothy got married, but congratulations.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that, James. Thank you.
And congratulations on this establishment. It's wonderful, and I just wish we were. I looked on the GPS today, and we're like 26 miles away or something like that. But it's a twisty, windy road between here and home. So, I'm going to be walking around the block or something to to walk off these samples before I get back in the car.
There's a great coffee shop next door.
There you go. Well, Casey, thank you so much. I appreciate the education, and I appreciate your continued friendship.
Thank you, James. Thanks for coming on out, and I continue to learn so much from your show, so thank you.
Well, thanks again to Casey. I took home 3 crowlers, and he put a picture of me on Instagram. It was busted. And I had a little taste of the bourbon beer, bourbon barrel beer that's on tap at Ivory Bill. And Casey and I chatted for a long time afterwards, so I was perfectly safe in driving back home. Responsible imbibing is something that Casey and Dorothy take seriously, as should we all, especially during this holiday season. You guys, stay safe out there. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to James at basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our mobile-friendly shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies always coming your way. Check that out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. So until next time, until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voice, and we'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.